What's going on, guys? It's Turin here, and today, guys, I'm here with a classic grudge match between the Dwarves and the Greenskins. So I will indeed be playing the Dwarves, led by High King Thorgrim, who in my opinion is honestly probably the most competitive Dwarf Lord. He has some really solid abilities. Let's go ahead and take a look here. So he does have the Book of Grudges, which gives plus 12 melee attack. So you can see that Sphere of Influence is pretty substantial. I mean, that's getting most of my army. And again, as the Dwarves, they usually play with a pretty compact army to get the massive benefits from the Runesmith and the Rune Lord and all that. So he's going to be a very good choice. On top of that, he does have the High King buff, which gives 8 melee attack, 8 charge bonus, 12% weapon damage, and immunity to psychology. So it actually is triggered, I think, if his leadership is lower than 50%, which again, in the late game, it can happen with a lot of people, obviously trying to snipe your lord and things like that. It makes him a pretty scary combatant. So what makes your army scary for that matter. So I do have High King Thorgrim. Aside from that, I do have a few Runesmiths, and in the front line, I do actually have some miners with blasting charges. So I've actually been experimenting with these guys a little bit, and as far as a cheap option for fighting against Black Orcs, I mean, obviously they're going to get crushed, but still the blasting charges are able to kind of disrupt the charges of Black Orcs and a lot of those other units, and it seems to be pretty useful. And you can see the Goblobber already lobbing some goblins over there. So I do have the miners with blasting charges here, and I have a second group here. As far as the front line goes, I do have Longbeards with great weapons, who they did get a change relatively recently. I'm sure most of you guys are already aware, but they do have the charge defense against large foes now, which is quite nice against, dealing with cycle charging and chariots and things like that. So I really like the Longbeards with great weapons. I do, of course, have the Grumbling Guard here, who are still essential despite the nerf. So again, they do have 18 vigor, or 18% vigor for all of your units in the radius. And again, it's pretty similar to High King Thorgrim. You can see it's kind of hitting that same type of area, but still, it used to be 30%, so it did get a pretty substantial nerf. On top of that, I do have Althar's Raiders, who are great. I mean, they're very good against the Arachnarch Queen, which traditionally is a very tough unit for the Dwarves to deal with. My opponent didn't bring it, but it's still pretty good at dealing with Black Orcs with their armor-piercing missiles, and they do have Marked by Althar if you really want to try and burn down an enemy lord. So aside from that, I do have the Runesmiths, like I mentioned, and then of course in the back, I do have the Goblobber, which is going to be guarded by a group of Slayers. So that's pretty much it for my army. And lastly, I should probably mention, I do have a group of Thunderers. I like to have maybe 1 or 2 missile units against the Greenskins just to deal with chariots. Well, people don't bring chariots a lot, but they're pretty good for poking down Black Orcs and just applying pressure to units that are normally pretty hard for the Dwarves to get to. So, all right, let's get into my opponent's army. So he has a front line of Black Orcs here, which is pretty standard. You can see these Black Orcs are already taking a lot of casualties from the Goblobber, actually. So pretty good stuff, but a whole front line of Black Orcs. On top of that, he does have Rusty Arrows and Night Goblin Archers, so pretty standard protocol there. Again, all very good units against the Dwarves. The Rusty Arrows in conjunction with Goblin Archers, once they sunder the armor of a unit, you can really get in there and do some good damage, even with cheap Goblin Archers. So that'd be pretty good against my Thunderers if he's able to get them in position. He does have an Orc Shaman here. He does have Foot of Gork, Ere We Go, and Gaze of Mork. I probably wouldn't bring the Foot of Gork against the Dwarves, but still, if I do kind of clump up a lot, maybe he'll be able to overcast and get some good value. So on top of that, he does have some Orc Boar Chariots. So I know you guys are often asking for chariots, so here's your chance. You get to see some in action, and man, look how freaking haggard these are. It's just like a little rickety fence, and they're just being pulled by those boars, which is pretty great. So he actually has 2 of those. He does have the Hammer of Gork, which is quite good. He has some nasty Skulkers back here. He's probably going to want to advance these because, again, the Dwarves don't really have any way of pressuring the back line, unless I want to send some secret agent Dawi or something, which is very uncommon. So he probably wants to pull these to the front line. He does, of course, have an Orc Warboss with the potions, which, he actually doesn't have potions, so interesting. But the Orc Warboss is a pretty good choice. It's armor piercing, it's mobile, pretty good at threatening, the Dwarves for the most part. So without further ado, let's get right to the action, guys. So we both have siege, so we're both kind of encouraged to advance on one another, and I was doing some good trading with these Black Orcs though, but I'm still taking some pretty heavy damage on these Thunderers here, but we're going to get some good shots in here right now, and we're going to shoot up some of these Black Orcs with armor-piercing missiles, so a pretty heavy barrage coming down, and the Thunderers do a ton of damage against armor, so they're able to wear these guys down, but still the Black Orcs are advancing pretty quickly, and he is using the Hammer of Gork, or excuse me, the Hammer of Gork, which let's go ahead and take a look at the tips. I believe it does punish accuracy by 40%, so very well played by my opponent, targeting my Thunderers and really kind of minimizing the effectiveness. You can see, I don't know if that's actually shown in the graphic, but again, it doesn't seem to be doing quite as much damage as it usually does. So I do switch the Hammer of Gork onto another group of Black Orcs, which is healthier. I kind of wanted to spread the love across his whole front line rather than focus down one group, but the Hammer of Gork did a great job shutting down my Thunderers over there. You can see my opponent is posturing up his Orc Warboss and some of these Gobos over here. Thankfully, I do have the Slayers back there to kind of protect, and the group of Slayers should be able to fend all 3 of these guys off pretty effectively, but I do have a very tight Dawi Death Star here. I guess it's not a true Death Star because, again, I do have ranged units, but still, The Night Goblin Archers coming in, you can see the Rune of Wrath and Ruin going off in these guys, and also the blasting charges are coming in and doing serious damage, knocking down a lot of these Black Orcs, He does get a pretty good charge there. I do countercharge with my other two groups, but I did kind of screw this up. But honestly, this group of Black Orcs is going to get beaten down by these Longbeards. Though you can see Rustier is just trying to snipe out my Runesmith there, which is pretty good stuff. But over here, these Longbeards have done a pretty good job getting the engagement on these Black Orcs, and both of them have taken pretty substantial shock damage. But unfortunately, he does have these chariots here, which I kind of just threw the miners into because, again, they are a fodder unit, but they're also taking crossfire from the Thunders over there. And the Thunders are very, very good at shooting these guys down. And you can see they don't get the best charge there. It was a little bit awkward. And the Thunders, they are a big unit. So, generally speaking, the Thunders are going to be able to shoot over the heads of their fellow Dawi and, cap these guys for the most part. So good stuff there. And I do have a Runesmith kind of sitting here in the wings, just waiting to see where my opponent goes. But over here, these chariots, again, taking some pretty heavy damage from the Althar's Raiders, but they are going to push in there and run through a few of them, which was a little bit unfortunate. So my backline does get compromised by those chariots a little bit, but still I'm able to do pretty good work with my Thunders and Althar's Rangers to kind of whittle these guys down, because if I can stabilize and get my backline online, those Thunders are going to do a very good job at kiting out the Black Orcs in the fourth quarter. So right now I do have the Runesmith back here helping as well, and they are shaken. They're taking axes from these guys, armor piercing axes, and of course the Slayers are coming up to help as well. But my opponent gets a really, really nice flank with these nasty Skulkers here, and they're able to just absolutely gank some of these miners right here. They're getting prison shanked, and it is not looking good. You can see some Black Orcs going off. I do have a group of Longbeards here who are going to put up a pretty good fight, but still, they're surrounded. The Orc Warboss here and his Goblin Big Boss Goon Squad were able to surround one of my Runesmiths, which I think is a very, very good tactic. If you have Goblin Big Bosses and, a group of them, just hunt enemy Runesmiths. They're extremely good for that. And the Orc Warboss is able to absolutely just punish this Runesmith, so very, very well played by my opponent, getting those guys off the battlefield very, very early. So I do have these Rangers here. They're going to turn around and start throwing axes at the opponent's Lord here, and they make some pretty solid contacts, and then on top of that, the Slayers are able to get a good surround, and it looks like I am casting something here. Yeah, the Marks by Althar. So I do cast that. So they're going to start taking some pretty heavy damage from the range here, and of course the Slayers are going to get in there and do some pretty good damage as well, and he doesn't have a potion, so very, very tough stuff there. But you can see his Night Goblin Archers are getting in there and shooting the Slayers, which is going to slow them down, allow his Lord to get away. So very, very good micro from my opponent. Over here in the center line, I was able to win this engagement. High King Thorgrim and the boys were able to just put an absolute beating on his Cav Force. Well, not his Cav Force, but on the Black Orcs and other units here. And, again, High King Thorgrim with that plus 12 melee attack, you can see their melee attack's at 50 right now, which is incredibly high. And High King Thorgrim, what's really nice about him is, and, one of the reasons I don't bring Grombrindle in a competitive sense is because Grombrindle would get knocked down by these chariots or any other Lord for that matter. Whereas High King Thorgrim, he's up on his big pimp cart, and he's very, very hard to, kind of stop him from doing what he wants to do. He can move, he's not going to be kind of bullied by flying and, cycle charging, and it's just a, a great Lord overall. So the Slayers getting in here and doing some good work against these Orc Boar chariots, and they're pretty much off the battlefield, so at this point my main army is going to be somewhat safe, and I kind of just need to roam around in a Goon Squad and hunt what's left of his infantry. But he was able to win this engagement, and you can see his Orc Warboss over here and the Goblin Big Boss is doing a very, very good job of chasing off my Thunders, and also, routing my Runesmith over here. But still, my army is looking pretty healthy, but he does have some Rustiers over here. He also has the Hammer of Gork still shooting, and he does have some Black Orcs coming back from route. So over here, High King Thorgrim and the boys are able to come in and settle some grudges. You can see Gabos flying all over the place, which definitely feels very, very good. McGRUDGIN, I'm loving it. And the Slayer's getting in here doing some jump kicks, which is probably still my favorite attack animation in the game when you jump kick a Black Orc in the face. Doesn't get that much cooler than that. But High King Thorgrim, man, he is such a cool leader. He's just getting in here and pushing these Orcs out, leading his people to victory. And his leadership's still pretty high, so, still at 95 actually. So it's not going to trigger the High King anytime soon, but he's doing a pretty good job chasing off these Goblin Big Bosses and all those other units. But still, I'm taking some pretty substantial fire from the Hammer of Gork, but it is about to run out of ammunition. It probably has about 4 or 5 more shots, but my opponent being very, very on top of his micro with the Goblin Big Boss, and you can see I'm so desperate I'm even using Runes of Wrath and Ruin just to try and poke these guys down, but they're chasing down my Runesmiths and also pressuring my Goblobber. But now that, I'm able to get back here and protect it, I think it's only one left actually. I think the other one's got destroyed, so there's like this massive cannon crew just kind of sitting here waiting. But hey, at least there's plenty of fodder units, right, to get in there and, start working if need be. But my opponent doing a very, very good tactical retreat right here, just kind of taking advantage of his mobility. But I still do have the Rangers here, so they're going to start throwing some axes. But my opponent, very, very on top of that Hammer of Gork back there, is targeting my ranged units and, taking away a lot of my tools I have to catch these mobile units. So over here, he does have some Black Orcs coming back. He has some 12 over here. It looks like he also has 11 there. He does have an Orc Boar Chariot there. But for the most part, most of his troops are shaken. You can see this Orc Shaman, which I was actually targeting with the Hammer of Gork. I was trying to rout him off. He's pretty close to being terror routed at this point. So pretty tough situation. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit because there's a little bit of posturing and regrouping from both of our ends, but I essentially just formed my battle line, and I'm just kind of waiting it out for now and trying to get my troops together. But, you know, he comes in with the rusty arrows and these goblin archers, and I will have to advance here because, again, I'm taking a lot of unnecessary casualties. I was just trying to use that goblobber right now, and you can see it's going to start shooting in at some of these goblin archers here and, you know, starting to rout their leadership. And he does come in pretty hard over here. And, you know, again, he's very, very mobile. My dwarf forces are somewhat slow. That was a little bit of a mistake. I should have, like, left some troops back here. But at the very least, you know, some of these troops are going to take some, you know, direct contact from runesmiths and slayers. And also this one goblin big boss does get kind of trapped, which is really good. Because at this point in the battle, you know, if you're losing big units like this, and you can see High King Thorgrim and the boys just absolutely spank that goblin big boss. Definitely settling some grudges for their ancestors there and, you know, putting this guy in a can. So he gets broken, and you guys can see that one break from that goblin big boss sounds the balance of power so heavily in my favor, which is really going to potentially trigger army losses for my opponent. So his Orc War boss over here is confident in all the guys, and at this point I think I get back on the Hammer of Gork. I don't remember 100%, but I decided just to advance at this point. I think I just kind of decided to leave the Goblobber back here. I'm not sure. No, it actually looks like I am reforming ranks. I mean, honestly, I could probably just wait out his ammunition. I do have enough durability, and you know, the Dawi are pretty bold here. They're a proud people. So another Rune of Wrath and Ruin going off in this Goblin Big Boss. It does pretty pitiful damage to single targets, if any. I think it like ticks for 5 HP. So still, you know, I was just trying to wear him down as much as I could. So go ahead and we'll do a little bit of a fast forward right now. So I decided to finally advance, you know, once I got my bearings, and of course the Goblobber, you know, I figured it wasn't worth protecting at that point. So the Goblobber doing a pretty good job kind of poking these units. You can see a Ruin of Wrath and Ruin going off in this big unit, and this Goblin crew is getting grudged on pretty hardcore. High King Thorgrim doing his thing, and these Longbeards over here with the Grey up and still steady, despite only having 24 models, are going to get in here and just do some serious work against these Rusty Arrows. Because again, you know, the Rusty Arrows are pretty decent combatants, as they are a regiment of renown, but still, you know, against some armored Jawi, they're not going to have a good time. And you can see they're wavering, they're getting cut up by these guys, although they did take about 2 casualties in starting to fight. So very, very well played by the Rusty Arrows here. Where's the Orc Big Boss? He's got to be around here somewhere. It looks like he is coming in the flank. He's still confident, but, you know, again, a lot of these Gobos are just getting the absolute smackdown. But the Orc boss comes in, gets a pretty good charge in these Longbeards on the flank. But, you know, now he's going to have to fight the High King Thorgrim here because, again, most of his troops are routing. Definitely going to start, you know, having terror issues. If he doesn't, like, stop me from punishing a lot of his infantry here, he's going to probably, you know, be in some trouble. So, Orc boss right here, focusing High King Thorgrim, but Thorgrim has the Rune of Oath and Steel, the Rune of Negation. He's just an absolute linebacker right now. So I'm just trying to focus this Goblin Big Boss. A little bit of a mistake. I probably should have gone after the War Boss, but it actually looks like maybe I was hitting the War Boss. But he does shatter due to army losses, and oh my goodness, look at that. High King Thorgrim was just the final grudge blow. Man, that's got to be one of the coolest finishes. Like, that guy just got, like, straight up evaporated. Like, the top of his torso just got shattered by the fury of High King Thorgrim here. Man, that was awesome. So very well played to my opponent, JPU 4545. It was a really, really good game, and pretty cool inclusion of the Orc Boar Chariots. I mean, they got a ton of kills. 84 and 69 against Dawi is pretty good. Granted, a lot of those kills were against the miners, but you guys saw they actually got in there and punished the Thunders, and he did a really good job with the Hammer of Gork, always using it on ranged units, which gives negative 40%, or not 40%, but negative 40 accuracy. I really wish that Creative Assembly would allow us to see like reload times and accuracy and all those kind of stats. I think that would be really cool. But anyways, it seemed to be pretty effective against my Thunders, essentially shutting them down because they got like 2 or 3 full volleys on a group of Black Orcs and were barely able to do anything really. So pretty interesting stuff there. But again, very well played to JPU 4545. Look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys all enjoyed that Grudge cast. Have an excellent night and take care.